Hello YouTube, this is Spencer from True Time Outdoors, and today I am doing another video on e-scouting. This time we're going over bears in early September. I use the app iHunter and I use the base map, Mapbox, satellite, which has the 3D option so that I can look at terrain in different ways. It's really great. You should check it out if you haven't already. I find iHunter to be a handy tool because if I have my iPhone with me, I can check it while I'm in the field. At home, I use my iPad to really hone in on specific zones and look at terrain in certain ways and really dig into spots. Let's not waste any more time here. Let's get right into it. This area that we're looking at here is basically an old burn. I like old burns for bears. I like them when they're higher up in elevation. This is specifically a higher up old burn, a higher in elevation old burn. I like hunting bears here in September because I feel that there's a lot of growth for these bears in September specifically. There's a lot of feed inside the actual burn itself for these bears in September. Lots of brush, lots of brush. It's kind of surrounded by slash, and then you've got old roads that come into this burn. One thing I want to point out here that I'm going to show you guys how to do is I'm going to put on the topo layers over top of my satellite. So let's go to our layers here. What we want to do is go to the GeoGratis topo, turn that on. It shows water, it shows drainages. That really does help, you know, because every animal cruises a drainage. There's always a game trail next to a drainage. It's a really good thing to hone in on and use is this GeoGratis layer for the maps. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna turn that layer off for now while I really look at the details, because it's kind of like a cluttered space. You get work done better when it's not as cluttered. One thing I really like about this area is there's a lot of diversity. So you can kind of come over into here and there is a little bit of subalpine, alpine, right? Little alpine patches, tiny, but it's there, right? I would generally call it subalpine. You've got burned out spots in the subalpine. And when that happens, from my experience in areas like this, is that you don't get a bunch of timber growing back in an area like this. You get growth of brush specifically when it's this high up. I'm not a biologist, but what I do know is that generally when these burns happen in these higher mountain areas, they don't grow back a bunch of timber. They have like open faces, specifically on the south faces. So on the south faces, it'll have like brush, and then on the north faces, you'll notice that it kind of starts to get a little bit of timber here and there. So all in all, in this area, I would say that, yeah, I like to hunt bears in a spot like this, but this could be good for elk. This could be good for mule deer. I mean, you do have to get in on those little microzone spots, those little pockets of elk or mule deer, depending on where they're at what time of the year. All these factors come into play for those animals, and we're not really hunting those. So now what we're gonna focus on is the two microzones that I have picked out within the area. I'll bring you over to the first zone on the left here, and essentially what it is, it has burn patches within a subalpine area that has dispersed trees that essentially you can glass because there's some breaks in the trees, there's some open patches, because of the burn in some little spots. It really is a nice little spot, and it is a saddle. For anybody that doesn't know, this is a saddle in a mountain. So that is basically almost like a pass that animals can use to cruise through. So yeah, that's kind of what this one zone is like. You're coming into an area that's been burned, that has some open patches that you're able to sit and glass on. And that's kind of the whole point of this, is that we can't hunt what we can't see. So let's take advantage of the burn and let's glass. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna come over to this heavy zone here and kind of just pick apart little spots. So this burn right here, I really like it. Honestly, it's a nice burn. Let's take a look. Like, this is gonna be the open face that we're focusing on right here. That's kind of our main focus little pocket within the zone. I like to focus on a spot like this because it's got so much open area to it, so it's easier to glass. You've got that open area, and then you've got a bunch of brush like to the south of it, and then which runs into like a little creek bed right there. Like, this is our little creek bed right along here, which is nice. Like, you could get animals that are cruising the creek and then they come up and they come into the top there to feed on that old open burn. I would say if it's really hot, then you need to focus on glassing close to the guts. A typical September, these days in British Columbia have been pretty warm, so focusing on spots that have a lot of brush, little canyons, like little canyon right here, this little draw coming down. So what I'm gonna do now that we got our face that we're focused in on, and that's our specific spot, I'm going to leave this and I'm gonna go back to the other little microzone, and I'm gonna pick some vantage spots here. Okay, so there's a vantage spot. Yeah, like that. You'll be able to glass that whole face. It's all south facing there. And it's really broken, so the animals are gonna feel secure in there. There's lots of timber around, and the saddle is a good travel path for animals. So yeah, I would say that's a pretty good glassing spot right there. That kind of is the best little vantage spot for this little zone, but you could sit right here and you could look down. You could look down into there, which is not too far. Look over to there, over into here. And it kind of tapers out and then it gets a little bit farther. But that ridge for you to be on right there is a perfect ridge to kind of work up and down and get different views of, like, up above this saddle and down below, where it starts to kind of drop in elevation and you've got different patches of burn that are open there. Now we're gonna take it like we're day hunting. So let's see, what's our approach to get up to this little microzone. Okay, let's just say that we can get to like roughly here. So, okay, our approach. So it's roughly 2 kilometers. I guess it's a pretty standard hike. Do it for first light, probably take you, let's just say it takes you 1 kilometer an hour. So 2 hours to get in there, and then you're there and you're glassing for the whole day, sort of thing. And you're moving up and down that ridge. Just depending on what you're seeing in certain spots, you're gonna have a lot of different views from that ridge. You're gonna be able to kind of pick apart that whole area. You might even want to work your way down here and get to here so that you can glass down over here more. there's lots of options, right? I like spots like this, old burns and really patchy. In a lot of spots, it's really hard to move through. It's taxing on the body. The fallen old burnt trees are just absolutely everywhere, and it makes it really hard. Okay, now that we've gone over that zone, let's go over to our other micro zone here. I mean, we could just call it a zone. It's actually pretty big. So let's think about our vantages right off the bat. That is kind of the hardest part about this spot here. But what I was thinking here, and I kind of noticed it while we were looking at this, if you kind of sat right on there, then you'd be able to at least see the tops of this. Now let's go back to that. Let's take a look. Yeah, you'd be able to see that, which is nice. You can see a lot of that. The only problem I have with that is that you can't see right down into the gut. And I think that's where you're gonna find the most travel from animals coming in and out of that spot. If we take another look here, like what can we come up with to like see into that gut? Like what would be the best spot to be able to do that? There's really not a whole lot, to be honest. But you could get high up on this hill and you might be able to see down into that gut. The only issue with that is that you're kind of shuffling around a lot. When I come into an area, what I want to do is I want to get into the spot and I want to plunk myself down right on the glassing knob, and I want to be able to look at my pocket that I'm really focusing on. But I do like that one knob that's there. I do also think that it offers glassing in the opposite direction, which is always a good option as well. So kind of like down into there. It's all brush and rock slide, sort of old burn. Yeah, that's pretty nice. I like that actually. So we'll keep that in there just as a frame of reference when we're in the actual spot. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna find another little glassing knob within this spot. Okay, so how about that? There. Yeah, and it's relatively close, so the stock's gonna be easier. For all you sharpshooters out there, that might be in distance for you, but not me. I'm not one of those guys. I like to get close. These spots to glass from, these two spots are the best spots that we possibly can find. We always have the option to kind of cruise down, hike down, and cruise through this. 1.5 kilometers in this terrain. Sometimes it's out of this world. Sometimes it's actually doable. Sometimes it's a breeze because of how it burned and what's open and what's not. But there's a lot of deadfall and there's a lot of burnt deadfall from before, and it's can be very hectic and it can suck a lot. Let's just say that that is kind of out of the picture. So what we're going to do is we're just going to say, yeah, our hunt is based off of those vantage points, and that's how we're gonna hunt that one spot. Anyways, we need to find our approach into this spot, which actually seems pretty easy. There seems like there's some roads nearby. So let's say, okay, this doesn't seem very easy to drive through. It looks kind of like a little old road. It seems like you might be able to get to right there with your truck. Let's see how far it is. Roughly. Okay, another 2 kilometers. I mean, that's not the worst it could be. It could be a lot worse. Not a lot of elevation gain, not a lot of elevation drop through that big portion of it. So yeah, probably about 1.2 kilometers is just a slight elevation drop, and then to get back up, obviously you're gonna have to climb a little bit, but it doesn't seem like it's actually that bad. It's kind of keeps height until that knob, and you can use that knob to glass either side. The problem with moving from this one glassing knob to this glassing knob is blowing out anything that's in here. You could possibly blow something out of there. Let's say like you'd have to come back up, go over, come around, and come back into this. That's another 1.7 kilometers. And if you're day hunting, that's ridiculous. So a spot like this is almost, it's almost backcountry worthy, I would say. It's almost, let's put a camp up in the top here, and then let's hunt from there and hike into these little knobs. So out of these 2 microzones, I would say I kind of like the smaller one more. I think it offers better advantages. I think it offers a better approach. I think it caters to someone that just wants to hike up for the day. The other spot, with that being said, is not a bad approach to the one knob to glass from. It's got a big face to cover. You got a good chance of seeing animal because you're covering so much ground, a lot more ground than the other little area, but it's still a little bit harder. And I can tell it's a little bit harder because half the hiking on the smaller zone, getting into the vantage, getting onto that ridge, is going to be easy walking, you know, because that's bare rock, right? Like that's alpine. I also think that this small one just offers a lot of different aspects and different spots to look from off of the one ridge, so you don't have to move very far to be looking at a different face or something like that. So I think if I were to pick a spot out of these to really go at and go for first, I'd hit this first, and then after that I'd be hitting this over here. Anyways, with all that being broken down and how we looked at this terrain, it's kind of an interesting spot. There's a lot to it. There's lots of different ways you can hunt it. There's lots of different advantages that you can get into, and you won't really know what it's like until you're in there, right? So let's review the spot. We've got the area. Which is a high mountain burn, kind of has a little bit of alpine, little tiny patches of alpine, not much, but subalpine, let's just call it subalpine, surrounded by slash country so that you can access the burn. They're hard to hunt, but they're cool spots to hunt. And then what we went over is the microzones. So this was really honing in on the spots that we want to hunt because of the features of the spot, because it's huntable, because we can see, and we can only hunt what we can see. It's a great spot. I like it. And then we talked about the hunt and that was finding our glassing knobs to the different faces that we wanted to cover, and then finding the approach to the glassing knobs. And the approaches were fairly far, but they're doable for a day hunt. You can do it. You kind of got to consider a lot of different things, right? You got to consider elevation gain. You got to consider your path to the glassing knobs. The approaches are very important to remember that you don't know what it's like until you're there, but reading the terrain and then going into the spot, and then when you're looking at another spot in the future, you go, okay, yeah, that ground looks like it's actually walkable, right? Some spots you'll go, nah, that looks insane. It's gonna be terrible. Which in this spot, there are a couple spots where, yeah, it's gonna be terrible. Like, I can tell you right through here, it's probably gonna be one of the worst spots in there. But if you come up and you go over this way, maybe it's not. So it's always like, play it in the field and adjust. You always have to adjust. Okay, well, after everything I've said, I think that find the glassing knobs and glass like crazy and expect lots of trouble in these old burns, but they do hold animals. You just got to get in and you got to spend some time in them. It's the only way to really do it, right? You got to spend time out there. What's the number one thing that we always got to talk about is that boots on the ground beats it all. It always will. So even though we e-scout, we need to go in and we need to pre-scout before we actually hunt it, or we just wing it. Just go for it. Sometimes that's the way to do it. And I actually do that a lot. Sometimes I'll basically use the hunting season to scout, right? I'll go to the spot, I'll hunt and be kind of scouting at the same time, because if you're hunting and scouting at the time you want to hunt it, then you kind of adapt to how the animals are in the area at that time of the year, right? If you're going to hunt it at that time of the year, then go in at that time of the year and find out where's what and what's what, right? You know, you'll find out what the access is like in that time of the year. You'll find out what the animals are doing at that time of the year. You'll find out where they're hanging out, what they enjoy, all these different factors, right? Time of the year matters. Early September bears is a fun time to get out for them. It's also a time to get out for mule deer, and that's going to be my next video, is going to be on September mule deer early in the alpine and the approach on a backcountry hunt for that. So thank you for staying tuned, and thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. And for those of you that really enjoy black bear hunting at the start of September, good luck out there. I hope that I was able to supply you with some value through this e-scouting video.